Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. This episode is brought to you by Orisha. Stop interruptions and focus on what matters most. Delegate repetitive duties in your tunnel to Orisha. Sleep better knowing that they'll call you if anything goes wrong in your greenhouse. Be sure to check out their homepage for useful advice on how to simplify your farm life. Orisha, that is ORISHA.io.
Farmers, do you want to see weeding tools before you buy them? Learn how to adjust cultivators in the field? Meet farmers from all over the country and see what's new in weeding tools. Then make plans today to attend the Midwest Mechanical Weed Control Field Day, September 11th at Purdue's Horticultural Research Farm in Lafayette, Indiana. At this full-day event, you'll see weeding tool demos of all scales in beets, cabbage, and corn. Everything from hand tools to two-wheel tractors, cultivating tractors, up to large row crop tractors. The morning trade show and education sessions are a great time to learn more and brush up your skills. Lunch is a great time to meet farmers from all over the country. And in the afternoon, the field demos of all scales will keep you interested and give you plenty to talk about and think about on the way home. That's the Midwest Mechanical Weed Control Field Day, September 11th in Lafayette, Indiana. You can find it by Googling Midwest Mechanical Weed Control Field Day or go to thelandconnection.org. See you there.
Hey, Thriving Farmers. Michael Kilpatrick here with yet another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. And today my guest is Lisa Johnston, who operates Frog Song Farm, a 20-acre family farm near Wanaka, New Zealand. Her farm features an organic artisan market garden supplying local restaurants and shops with vegetables and herbs, while also developing orchards, nut groves, woodlots, and an apiary, all aimed at creating a regenerative rural livelihood. Lisa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here. And it's Wanaka.
Wanaka. Okay, I was going to ask you about that. All right, near Wanaka, New Zealand. All right. Talk to us a little bit about the farm. It's 20 acres. Talk about the climate, kind of a little bit about the growing conditions on the farm, the soil type.
Yep. Okay, so Wanaka, we're about 20 kilometers out of Wanaka. So it's sort of an alpine town. We're kind of nestled in against the Southern Alps here. It's about as interior as it gets in New Zealand. We are on the 45th parallel about, so it's quite similar to, say, Quebec, I think, that kind of place, but
okay,
a lot more volatile. Like we don't have that continental climate. We're a little island in the Pacific. So we have, out of season frosts and things like that. Our winters, they're not as deep as what you guys experience over there. So we're in the depth of winter now. It's pretty frozen out there at the moment, but it's very rare to get snow to ground level. But it is pretty deeply frozen at the moment. So the growing conditions, the soil that we're working is loess, basically. It's from the glacial period in the past. So it's really fine glacial loess. The parent rock is mostly schist, so it's sort of, it's got a really specific geology in this area. It's quite fine. If we have to do a lot of deep forking to open it up, and if we don't do that between crops, it can kind of collapse on itself. So the name of the game here is to just get organic matter into the soil and start building structure, because it's actually a reasonably good balance of, we're lacking a few trace minerals and things, but the name of the game is organic matter and just building the structure of the soil and balancing out those trace minerals. Rainfall's pretty low. We have low rainfall. It's about 0.5 meter a year. Within our country, we're seen as sort of the desert or the edge of the desert. We're in the rain shadow effect from the Alps. So all of the weather systems, all the rainfall comes across the Tasman Sea from Australia, and it hits those Southern Alps, and they kind of push all that air up and it cools down, and that makes it rain over the Alps, and then kind of keeps coming across here to the east, and it basically runs out of gas in the Alps. So it rains a lot in the Alps, but over here to the east of that, it can be quite dry. But we do have a lot of groundwater, and our farm in particular, like the area we were looking at, we were like, oh no, it's quite a windy, exposed, dry place, probably won't be a very good place. And then we came and had a look, just for the sake of being thorough, and we got here, and it's a really inverted part of the landscape. We have a big wetland running through our property. There's a lot of groundwater. There's springs popping up everywhere. So it's actually, and there's a big range behind us which powers that whole thing. It's a huge range full of schist, broken up schist, which holds a lot of water. So even though we're in a dry place, we actually do have plenty of groundwater to work with.
Gotcha. Yeah, water's super important.
Yeah.
So then on the 20 acres, kind of like how's it split up between the different enterprises?
Yeah, so when we first got here, we did a habitat map. We one of our mentors helped us to do that, and we identified, what areas were good for what. So most of the farm is actually tree crops. We have another business called Village Nuts, which is a nut business, trading in nuts. And we've always just harvested and sold nuts from other people's properties. But, we also have this plan to eventually do that from our own farm. So we've planted a reasonable amount of hazelnuts, chestnuts and walnuts. And we sort of have identified the habitats which are most suitable for that. And then our little market garden is tucked around the barn, which is our hub really. In the permaculture sort of design world, that would be our zone one. It's where the barn is, our wash pack. Our market garden's sort of squeezed in all around that. And then the next step out is we've got a little bit of a apple orchard going on, and then just lots of other trees and plants. Yeah. But the market garden, I'm not very good with measuring acreage or anything, but yeah, it's I would say, I think I figured out the other day, it would be a bit over half an acre, maybe half an acre of actual cultivated market gardening stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about getting the land, because it sounds like you guys, it took a while to find the property. So kind of talk a little bit about that process of getting onto the land and searching for that.
Yeah, it wasn't really in my plan, to be honest. I had been sort of trying to figure out how to make a livelihood in horticulture and in rural kind of spaces for a while. And I didn't really have any we didn't have any capital behind us, so we didn't really think it was even a possibility. So we had been living in our yurt, just renting out little corners of farms who were doing related type things. And that was kind of our plan, really, just to keep doing that, and be semi-nomadic, I guess, living in our yurt. And we did sort of move around a wee bit before we did that. But yeah, I guess we had a few things going on. We had Village Nuts up and running already. I had an orchard care business. We had a few things already happening in terms of livelihood and horticulture. But yeah, no plan to get land. And market gardening really wasn't on my radar at that point either. But yeah, we got pregnant with my daughter, who's now 8. And I guess that tugged at some heartstrings in my parents, and they just sort of made it known to us at that point that they were keen to see us on our own land and have that security, which is really awesome of them. So we gratefully accepted, and we started to look for land together. It's really our family, our whole family's farm. They sort of have bankrolled that side of it. We all went looking together and came across this place, and it just felt pretty cosmic, when we got here. Like I said, we didn't really even want to look in this area. The place where we have our farm is known as being quite windy and exposed. It's sort of elevated above it, and it's a windy area. And but once we got here and just saw this place, we were it was one of those moments where you kind of got stopped in your tracks and went, oh, well, I guess that's what we're doing, because this is us. This is us.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's how it started. We moved on in 2017, in the end of that year. So yeah, we've been slowly going from there. And I didn't, like I said, I was pretty much just deep in being a new mum and doing all of that at that time, and I didn't really have my eye on market gardening quite yet. So we didn't come here with that intention. We came here with the intention of putting into practice some bigger ideas we have about regeneration and, restoring landscapes and working with water in landscapes.
Okay, so then you really didn't have the idea of the farm at that point. You're really more just trying to get on the land, get out of suburbia, I'm assuming, or the city, or...
Well, not really suburbia. We were, like I said, we were in our yurt living on people's farms, so we were already underway. We already had village nuts up and running. I was doing pruning. I was doing horticultural jobs, and I just had the intention, I guess, of carrying on in those lines of work. And I already had little market gardens going, from here and there. I'd have little stalls at the market gardens. So I was already dabbling in that world, but I hadn't seen all the examples that you guys over there in America are putting out. I hadn't seen that sort of thing yet, and it hadn't occurred to me that you could have a market garden on such a small acreage. So that kind of came a little bit later, a few years into our journey here, when I was emerging from young babyhood.
Yeah. So then let's talk a little bit about what Village Nuts was. And then are you actually expanding into orchards on your farm currently?
Yeah, so Village Nuts, when I landed in Wanaka, which was, I think, back in 2010, I'd say, I kind of had been woofing around New Zealand for a couple of years, and I had come to this sort of conclusion that I needed to find a livelihood, and aligned with my values, which was basically permaculture type things at the time. And I'd kind of figured out that trees were a big part of that for me. That was what I wanted to dedicate myself to. Didn't know where to start or what to do, but while I was figuring it out, I just did little jobs just to keep myself on the path, So I took a job at a vineyard, a really nice organic vineyard in Wanaka. It was just the harvest, I think. I was picking grapes, and I looked over the fence, and there was this avenue of big, beautiful chestnut trees that were just falling on the ground. Chestnuts were just falling on the ground, and I was like, interesting. What's happening to those? And I hadn't even had chestnuts before. I just knew that they were a food that people liked. So got a handful, cooked them up at home, and that was sort of how it all began. So, fast forward a couple of years, we negotiated a deal with the owners of that land, who were quite elderly. They were just tree crop enthusiasts, or she was actually the wife in that partnership. She was like in her 80s. She'd never harvested them. She had intentions, I think, but she was getting old, and it was really a hobby. So there was about 130 mature trees there, and we took on the task of hand harvesting that crop. We just picked out the nicest looking ones. We did it all by hand, and everything was, we washed them by hand and racked them. We rented out a chiller from a flower grower down the road. So once they were washed and racked, they get bagged and put in onion bags and put into a chiller. So we put them in there, and then my partner, who's really clever with building things, built a beautiful chestnut roasting cart out of, bits and pieces from bike tires, and it's all beautifully handmade. And I put together some funky costumes, autumnal kind of nutty costumes, and we took to the streets of Wanaka and started selling hot roasted chestnuts, which was an interesting journey. Like nobody in New Zealand, even though they grow really well here, nobody knows what chestnuts are. So we introduced a lot of people to chestnuts. Free samples was the name of the game. What saved us really in those early years was the fact that we are quite a tourist town in Wanaka. Like, it's a very beautiful place. It's a big lake. It's alpine. We have heaps of tourists. It's like Queenstown, which is also nearby, big tourist area for New Zealand. So yeah, there was heaps of tourists, and all the people from Europe, Middle East, Asia, all of those older countries know chestnuts. They're really nostalgic for them, and they love them. And so we would have the full range of experience. You go out there on the street, and half the people would be Kiwis who would be like, what's that? And they'd try it, and they'd be like, like it was not what they expected. When you say a chestnut, people imagine, who haven't tried them, imagine a nut, something crunchy, probably salty protein. But they're the opposite. They're like a sweet potato. They're soft, and they're sweet, and I think it's just a really unexpected experience for people. So most New
Yeah.
Zealanders who you'd give a free sample to would go, "Oh, that's unusual," and you'd have a nice chat and stuff, but they weren't really our key customers. Whereas you'd be standing there on the cart, and an Italian or a Swiss or a Chinese person would come up and just be so excited and just gush to you for a good 5 minutes about what chestnuts meant to them and how what an important part of their childhood they were. And yeah, so it was quite an interesting bipolar experience, the old chestnuts, the customers. But yeah, we keep doing that we've done it for over 10 years now. We've downscaled it a bit. We've sort of figured out which parts of that business are really profitable and which parts were a bit of hard work. We love it.
Yeah.
It's a really big part of our culture, our family culture now. My daughter's grown up from day one being part of that business, and she loves it. She loves chestnuts. And yeah, it was a great little side hustle that we've carried on, and it's really become a fun part of our family culture.
So do you still now go back to the original chestnut grove and harvest those, or?
Yeah, we do. So, well, it's not just chestnuts. The orchard had chestnuts. It also has hazelnuts on that property. And we found another place where there was a walnut crop that wasn't being harvested. So we've worked with all of those crops. Both those farms, the walnut place and the chestnut hazel place, are owned by elderly people or elderly couples. And tree crops are a multi-generational crop. You might plant them, and then the next generation is really the one who may or may not take that on. So unfortunately, the owners of that farm passed away last year or 2 years ago. Can't remember exactly when, but so yeah, that property is actually on the market at the moment. So there's a chance that we won't be doing that next year. Depends on who buys it, I guess. So yeah, we've planted our own chestnut trees. You don't actually need a lot to do what we did. You just have to, have maybe 10 or 20 really good trees is enough for what we were up to. As a good little side hustle in the shoulder season. So yeah, we're planting. We're busy planting. We've got, I guess we're not going to be ever. It's always just going to be a small artisan thing for us. That was sort of the interesting thing we looked at. The people in New Zealand who are trying it, they tend to be too small to be really mechanized, and they're probably too big to be by hand as well. So the types of people who are doing it are sort of people who are good at building their own making their own machines and knocking things out, but it hasn't really become an economic thing in New Zealand yet. So we just came in at the bottom end, really, the real artisan scale, do everything by hand and try and value add and that get the most for your work. That was sort of our strategy with the nuts, and that will probably be the way it will continue. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm assuming picking them up is the hard part.
Yeah, it's quite nice though. Like especially it's a really beautiful environment where the chestnuts we were picking were right on the lakefront, like a really prime, beautiful orchard. Like it's just a really nice place to go. So it's the end of the season usually, and it's quite a nice break from you're at home on the farm, on the market garden. There's just like a million different jobs to do, and it's like trying to balance all these jobs. When you go there to pick the nuts, it's just one job to do, and that's pick nuts. It's quite therapeutic for me.
Yes, I can
Yeah.
imagine. Yes.
And
Yeah.
you do get quick. You do really get quick. And the good thing about doing it by hand is that, like, some people do it with machines that suck up the whole orchard floor, basically. And then you've got all these leaves and off nuts to sort of sort through, prickles and all of that. Whereas we were grading as we went, so you're only picking up prime nuts. You don't pick up old nuts. You're really just, it takes away the need to do a lot of sorting and cleaning up later when you do it by hand like that. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know, we always enjoyed it. It was always a fun part of our year being there. And it's autumn, so it's beautiful. It's a calm time of year. It's the mellow time of year in terms of our weather, and all the colours are coming through, and it's quite a magical thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the current nut orchards. You have orchards now. Are you planting those now for the next generation?
Yeah, we are. That's sort of Greg's domain, my partner. I've been so locked up in the market garden, really, and he's taken over that whole realm. But yeah, we're putting the chestnuts up on the
Yeah.
sunny. The good thing about nuts is that they drop their crop, so they're good for slopey ground. Um, you don't want to be up on ladders picking other kinds of orchards on slopes. It's not so easy, but all of the nut crops that we work with, chestnuts, walnuts, and hazelnuts, don't really require a lot of or any pruning really. So there's no ladder work needed. They drop their crop. You can use the slope to your advantage. You can either rake downhill or lay nets down and roll, just roll them down the hill. So we've got a lot of slopes to work with. We've got a sunny north-facing slope, which is where our chestnuts go. Our walnuts are sort of straddling one of our side wetland branches, and our hazelnuts are on our west-facing slope. Yeah, so we're going for it. We've got a really cool hazelnut variety that it's only just come into New Zealand. Everyone in New Zealand was growing White Heart for a while and really low print. They identified it as the best one for our environment in the 80s, and everyone was growing it. And then maybe 10 years ago, they finally got all the yield data, 30 years in, I guess, of what they were actually yielding, and the yields were really low, like 2 kilos a tree or something like that. So one of the great people from the tree crops world managed to bring over a variety called Jefferson from Oregon, and that is proving to be a lot more productive, about probably 5 times the production that those earlier varieties are. So New Zealand is sort of still figuring out these crops, I guess, in terms of what grows best here. But yeah, Jefferson seems to be the one for the hazels. And I think chestnuts wise, it's again pretty early days. We're just figuring it out. We had the benefit of this big orchard that we've worked in for 10 years, and I know that orchard so intimately, and I've figured out which are the best nuts, and we're just planting those from seed at the moment and working with those. We tried field grafting. It's pretty hard, actually, chestnut field grafting. It's something we'll probably keep trialing and working on. But yeah, and the Mayrick variety is the walnut variety that we've selected based on what we learnt from all our time in the walnut orchard. That seemed to be the best one for our environment. Really thin shell and lots of kernel, and yeah, good nut.
Yeah. Yeah. And then along this whole journey of you getting started with the farming, you were doing the pruning. So you were just going around and pruning people's trees.
Yeah, so that's I guess it's a good way to start if you don't have land, just to carve off what skills are valued, in the community. What skills that that are needed, I guess. And I was pretty keen on trees and orchards, and I just had done a free course that was this by a provider in our area on pruning, and really enjoyed it. And I took the first season, I just carried on with that vineyard pruning grapes, and pretty boring. It was good.
Yeah.
Horticulture's, jobs like that are good to give you that discipline, to show you the importance of moving quickly, refining every little teensy movement, and yeah, just learning the art of that. I think it's important for anyone who wants to get into become their own boss in horticulture to actually work for another horticultural outfit and just learn that discipline to go quick. So that was good for that. And then the next season, I was like, right, I want to do something more interesting with this knowledge, and I just bought some orchard ladders, got together the basic tools. Nothing mechanized, just hand saws, really good loppers and secateurs. Put an ad up in the local rag, and yeah, next minute I was out there being an orchard expert, even with so little experience. It's that whole thing of, you got to fake it to make it. And I had, I did know the theory pretty solid, but I was doing a lot of learning on the job, to be honest. So yeah, I did that, and it's been a great little winter job for me over the years. I've done it for over a decade. Visited heaps of different orchards. It's sort of expanded out into lifestyle blocks and things. It's a skill that a lot of people who have, just a few trees in their backyard, or even a bigger orchard in their backyard, It's something that people don't have confidence to do, and they do need support with it. So it is a really great little skill if you can master that. It's a good little, and it's good having a service up your sleeve. I learned, when we're working with nuts, you're working with products. It can take a while for that to be profitable. The margins are pretty slim, but when you have a service you can provide, it's effort and a decent hourly rate back. It's a good way to get things rolling. Get yourself in the horticultural world, have a service up your sleeve that you can do. So I did that for a good decade, and then towards the last 2 or 3 years, I was sort of running out of steam on it, I guess. I wanted to work in a team. It felt like I needed to do it in a team environment, but I did not want to take on any more admin in my life. I had plenty going on. And luckily, a good friend of mine who's got a landscaping business brought me into her fold. So I've joined her landscaping company really as a team member. And yeah, I just sort of have become the team leader or team expert, I guess you'd say, helping to train up their crew. And we've got this little specialist orchard pruning team in their business. Yeah, so it's great. I'm still getting the hourly rate. Don't have to do any admin, just turn up, do my thing. And it's becoming less and less me on the tools, more and more me just teaching and educating people on it. But yeah, it's good.
Gotcha. Hey, farmers, controlling disease in your greenhouses is super important. And I am here with Guillaume from Orisha to talk about that. So why is it important?
Yeah, controlling diseases in the greenhouse is important because you put so much effort growing those crops. And then if you end up with mold in them, you won't be able to sell it. So it's a lot of work that you're just throwing out of the window.
Absolutely. And then with that, humidity is the main cause of that disease, correct? Talk to us a little bit about how humidity works and why it causes disease.
Yeah, well, most of the diseases can be prevented by controlling the humidity because that's the condition that allow them to grow. So you get all these kind of mold, all these kind of rot that can happen. And if you reduce the amount of humidity that is typically high in a greenhouse, then you can prevent, maybe not eliminate completely, but you can prevent most of it.
Mm-hmm. And talk to us about some strategies that automation or the Orisha system can help with humidity.
Yeah, first thing is doing the humidification pulses. So basically, every once in a while, you want to change the air in the greenhouse to bring colder, drier air outside. That will just lower the humidity. And you want to do that a few times a day because you don't want the greenhouse to stay too humid too long. That's when disease happen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then there's the other aspect, which is ramping. In the morning, you don't want to have like very quick warm up of the greenhouse because that's going to create condensation on the fruit, and then you're going to have quality problem with that.
Absolutely. And then irrigation can also cause disease. Talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, sure. These are harder to see because it happens in the soil. So when the soil is too humid for too long, there's not enough space for oxygen in there, then the roots are going to rot. You might wonder why your plants gives you so bad harvest, so bad yields. And maybe it's just because of these roots being rotten. So you want to keep the soil as dry as possible while keeping enough water for your plants to transpire. It's basically just having consistent irrigation with small doses that will help you.
All right. To find out more about Orisha, including their popular leasing option with no upfront costs, go to Orisha. That is Orisha, ORISHA.io. Also, you can download their free guide, Maximizing Your Greenhouse Income, at the website orisha.io. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, let's move into the market garden. Talk a little bit about kind of like what your season looks like there.
What our season looks like. Right, you want to know about last season? It's changed every year, We're on that. I figured out we're about 5 seasons in. So, and
Okay.
and I have been, it's been a not slow. When I say 5 seasons in, the first season was going to markets a couple of times a week, but it wasn't like big. It was pretty little, learning the craft. So we've had, every season's been a completely different model, really. And we've got to the point I think it was a season ago where I was like, right, it's got to be more than me driving this. I can't. It didn't feel. It's that whole scaling thing, I guess. When it starts off, it's just you, and then I had interns with me, and then yeah, my parents went so well last year, and I thought doesn't feel resilient. Like I can't step out at all. I'm really deep stuck in this thing. Like I can't. There's no movement for me if I'm needed elsewhere. Like I really felt a bit trapped, and I was like, right, what's needed is to build a team. Like teamwork is, and the phrase that stuck in my head was market gardening is a team sport. And that's been my little motto, I guess. That drove my last season. Was we scaled up by about 40% to try and get to that place where I can have a team. So we would probably be the minimum size farm that you could have, like market garden, where you could actually support a team. And I'm still in that process of getting it to that. But yeah, we have last season. Our core business is salad and herbs and quick crops. It's sort of based on what I learnt from the likes of Curtis Stone and Jodie Roebuck in New Zealand. But yeah, like it's a model where that's our core business, all the quick crops that are most profitable but also most work. And then our other whole wing of our business, I'm a foodie. I like to grow everything actually, and I'm like that's my real passion is I want to keep learning and developing and not just growing these quick crops. So, even though we're pretty small to do that, we do grow everything. We grow the whole range of veggies. So yeah, I'm one of James Fortier's in his masterclass, one of his students, I guess. And so we're just applying his methodologies for all of those other long season crops. We just basically follow that formula. And those crops are, to me, that's how we keep it interesting. That's how we kind of keep ourselves, it's been a great value add as well. Like we have chefs and shops who we supply with our salads. So they're all on basically standing orders. They're getting us big orders of salads and herbs every week, which is continuous, like supply basically. We have like probably a dozen, maybe a bit more crops that are on continuous supply to those people, to those shops, and they're always available every week, same product lines. And then we have this other half of our business, which is all the longer season crops, more interesting things, and that they're kind of offered to those customers as value adds basically. So every week I'll just be texting my chefs and saying, right, we've got all the usual stuff, plus this week we have da 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 da, and some nice photos. And yeah, it's good. It's a good model actually. And that side of the business that is also where we're able to use more interesting like seeds with stories, like from people who are heirloom growers. We've got some great heirloom seed growers in New Zealand. There's a couple really who we support, and that's where we're kind of exploring those things. And I think in the future that's where we would do like seed saving and that kind of stuff. But we would keep all our quick crop, that side of the business. That'll be always just high production seeds that are performing what we that we can rely on. But just gives us an area, a realm that we can explore and be geeky kind of gardeners and enjoy developing our seed lines and that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's where we've got to. Like we have done CSA type things in the past and markets and all of that, but when we scaled up last year, I just sort of decided it needed to be simpler. So we dropped markets, we dropped the veggie boxes, home delivery type things, and we're just doing wholesale to shops and restaurants and cafes. Although there has been a local NGO, yeah, like who've put on like a big autumn harvest market, and they're going to put one on at solstice this year as well. So we'll have 2 markets that we'll go to. Which are great, it's fun. And when there's only 2, it's kind of exciting. You can plan for it. Put out some really glamorous, gorgeous crops that kind of draw attention. And yeah, I think so. And it's good for us to have a public moment in the season. So yeah, looking forward to those.
Yeah. What would you say the biggest challenge is with a market garden in New Zealand?
I think it's all around, economics, as it is probably everywhere. Just, prices are set by industrial farming, and we, and food is expensive in New Zealand anyway, for everybody. So it's just, the model, really, creating the economic model. I think there's been a few people who have come and gone, burnout, I've seen that happening over the years, market gardeners coming and going with burnout. And I think it's just getting through those first years of development and having that really strong fix on all of the stuff that you and your cohorts teach about being efficient and building systems that make things flow, and just that whole realm that you guys are educating everybody about. I think that's the way, is to get through those first development years and to have a model that works. I wouldn't say that. Yeah, I think that's definitely the biggest challenge in New Zealand, is just the economics. People have struggled to make it work. Yeah.
Now, on the market garden, what is your irrigation like? Is that like little overhead, or because you did talk about you guys having limited rain?
Yeah, so we put a bore down last season or last winter, so we have got proper water now, which is great. Before that, we only had 9,000 litres a day for our 20-acre block with over 1,000 trees on irrigation, and plus a market garden. It wasn't really enough. We lost a few trees that season, and then this last season, we had ample water, but we learned pretty quickly that it actually, even though we did go a bit crazy, we were a bit excited and we just watered everything. And then we got the power bills and realized that it actually cost quite a lot of money to pump water around. The power bill went up from, I think it tripled from what it had been the season before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we'll probably be a little bit more frugal this year. But yeah, and in the garden, that's actually one of my goals in the next few weeks, months, is to get a proper irrigation system with automation and all of that jazz finally set up, because I've just been using little hand timers, like dial-up timers, and overhead actual oscillating sprinklers. So that's one of the last steps for me to get proper. So yeah, looking forward to that. It's going to be amazing to just know that that part of it is taken care of. We have we're known for a really strong solar here. It's very like the sun. We have a bit of an ozone hole over New Zealand, and so the sun, and in this where we are in the interior, it can be really full on, the heat. So we got to water a couple times a day to keep things cool in the summer. So it's a real burden when you don't have automation. Just thinking about that all the time, and
Correct.
Yeah.
Automation. We could not run our farm without the irrigation automation.
Yeah,
we do a lot of that.
I can't wait for that. We do use a bit of drip. We use drip on certain crops, but everything also needs to have overhead available. Yeah.
You talk about your bigger mission is redefining farming in your community, and talks about New Zealanders are shamefully biased about chemical use. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so blasé, I think the word was. But yeah, New Zealanders, we have this sort of image globally about being clean and green. It's a bit of a marketing thing. It's not the reality. The reality is that, New Zealanders are pretty trusting people, pretty naive probably when it comes to that sort of thing. Like the generation is probably similar to America, I'm sure. Like the general public pretty much thinks if it's being sold at a local department shop, it's probably safe. Most New Zealanders would be quite happy to use glyphosate around their veggie garden just to keep the edges clean. There's a real comfort with chemicals. We have contractors coming up and down our roadsides, spraying all our roadsides, which is a real problem, especially like we've got bees, and the roads are, when the summer kind of progresses, everything sort of dries out, and the last areas to have wildflowers are the roadsides, because the water, when it does rain, kind of rolls off those roads, and that's the places that keep wet longer. So the end of the season, when the bees are still foraging, like those roadsides are where the action's at, and then the council people just come over and spray them with herbicides. So yeah, it's a problem. There has been a strong organic movement in New Zealand for a few decades now, so it's happening, but it's pretty slow. And the other big thing that we kind of, in our area in particular, the big battle for us is people have become accustomed to thinking that our landscape is naturally desert. You know, we do have that rain shadow effect, like what I mentioned earlier, but actually the desertification that we have here is actually man-made. You know, if that watershed was intact, if it was fully vegetated all the way to the Alps, then all of that water that's falling on the Alps would be gushing out everywhere. Our whole country was, before, you know, humans settled it and came in with their farming systems and burnt it, it was mostly forest and wetland. It was like, apart from the high alpine areas, there weren't really any grasslands in New Zealand apart from the subalpine zone. And then after, you know, a couple of centuries or a century or so of burning, grazing, clearing, it has become a bit of a desert where we are. So one of our missions is sort of kind of reminding people that that's not the reality. That's actually a man-made situation. And we have, you know, wild plants that are so-called invasives, I guess you'd call them, which is nature trying to reclothe herself. We have a lot of wild pines, we have lupins, we have a lot of plants that are nature trying to cover herself because she's been stripped bare. And we're kind of working on this space, trying to like show people that there's this real kind of native good, exotic bad mentality, and we're trying to like break that down a little bit and go, hey, even though this plant wasn't here before the Europeans were here, it's actually it's nature in the present moment trying to, you know, cover herself and to repair this broken ecology. So we're pretty pro invasives, I would say. Certainly, you know, in these areas that have been so modified and so desertified. And so we often end up sort of on the other side of the fence to the mainstream environmentalist movements, because we're saying, hey, like, it's more important to clothe this environment and to revegetate it and to reverse some of this desertification than it is to be stuck on an idea of whether something's native or exotic. Like, you know, let's work with these natural processes that are happening. It's important to work with rather than pit ourselves against all the time. So yeah, it's interesting. It's it's an unusual place to find yourself, kind of fighting the environmentalists for the environment, but that's where we find ourselves a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. There's a book here. I can't remember the name of it. I've got it on my shelf. Actually, I think in the other room. I read it over the winter. It talks about how a new way of thinking about invasives, because in many aspects, the invasives are just the next generation of what's going to live in our areas because of much of what we've done to the earth.
That's right.
So, you know, the natives can't survive because, you know, the salts in the soil or this or that.
Yeah.
Or just how polluted it is. But some of these other ones, they may not be natives. They may be from another country, but they are what's going to thrive and hold back the stream banks or whatever the process that needs to happen. So anyway, I'd like to get those folks on the podcast because I think it'd be a fun conversation, just and obviously sobering conversation to talk about that. But there's a lot of truth to what you say right there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just really important. You know, we are in a dynamic time. Things are changing, and we need to work with nature, stop this whole, you know, this whole control mentality. I mean, it's very well if you have a farm and you want to actually have plant food trees or that kind of stuff. Okay, so you don't want to have a wild plant there, or you know, you don't want that invasive pine there, perhaps. But what we're talking about is huge areas of our land which are, you know, have been decimated by pastoral farming. We've had, in the areas that we are, you know, the history of it is that the government, the early settlers had like vast, like it's like ranches in America, I think, you know, vast areas of land, too big for one family, like way too big, hundreds of thousands of hectares. And the only way to farm that sort of scale of farm is to burn it and like That's what they did, and they still do. And, of course you're going to have invasives trying to, invasive plants, pioneer plants going to try and cover that land that you've cleared, of course, and it's just really ridiculous in those kind of scenarios to sort of go, oh no, but like there's some native tussock, it's okay, we've got to keep that. And it's like, no, you actually just need to let it recover and come up with some more, some different land use. Some land use that's in harmony with nature's desire to be back in forest again,
On your farm, how do you guys manage your team? It's not a very big team you guys have, correct?
No, yeah. So I have myself. I'm the market gardener in the team. Head gardener, driving that whole side of the business. I have an intern who comes. I usually have a 6-month internship I offer. And up till now, that's how it's been. We've had me, the intern, and then in the garden, and my partner Greg. He does all the infrastructure around us, and he's sort of involved in the bigger project of planting all the trees and irrigation and farm infrastructure. But he's also our delivery guy. He's quite a character. He's quite charismatic, and he's quite personable. So we send him out, does the delivery, keeps all our customers happy. He's our public face. And last season, as we're expanding, I started bringing back a previous intern. She came back for 2 days a week. Just another lady down the road who really wanted to be part of it. So she came and did all the seed trays with me every week, and we just swapped veggies. So there was a team of basically, 3, 4 in the garden, I guess, if you count all that up. How do I manage it? So, the intern usually does 30 hours a week, and then I like to do it that way, so they've still got 10 hours to develop their own side hustles and figure out, and do their own learning and their own development work. I didn't want to fill up their whole work with the farm stuff. I wanted them to have 10 hours left to start being entrepreneurial or figure out how they could develop their own thing. And that's kind of my mission with my interns, is to impart that whole entrepreneurial thinking. I think it's really easy just to kind of work for somebody else and get your hourly wage and not think too hard about it, just kind of go through the motions. But what's really needed, I think, for people to develop and grow is to start dabbling in their own side hustles and in their own entrepreneurial things. And that's where I try to do with my interns, is give them those sort of ideas and leads and help them take those little steps, those little baby steps, which hopefully will lead to more people doing it. So we it's cool. It's a good little team. This season we're going to try something different. My intern wanted to stay on, which is great. So we were ready for that, and he's going to be just a contractor, still on that 30-hour thing, and we'll still take an intern. We have got an intern sort of lined up as well. Not sure whether that will be a full 6-month one or just maybe a 3-monther or something, and 2 3-monthers. So this will be the first season where we'll have 3 of us on the farm as a little team in the market garden. One learner, one middle, not learner, trained up person, and then and it's great. This guy, the intern I've had is super competent, really strong, really efficient. He's a great team member, so I'm excited to give him the opportunity as well to be a mentor to the intern that's coming. I think that's one of those things that's really cool, like for your own development, to have somebody who's underneath you or who you're teaching as well. It helps to really solidify learning when you've got someone else to pass that through to. So I think it's a cool model, having 3 of us.
Yeah. For that middle person, you kind of have to slow down enough to know that, to say, what have I learned here, and how can I explain it to the next person?
Yeah. I know for myself, whenever I really wanted to lock in a piece of knowledge or skill, it's the best way is to do a workshop on it and train other people. That's the way.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice would you give to someone who's thinking of getting started in market farming?
My big advice is to start small and work, take things in steps, Um, that's how I've done it anyway, and it worked for me. um,
Yeah.
I think there's a real risk of biting off more you can chew a little bit with this whole realm, and I think there's just it's such a multifaceted profession. You've got to be a really good gardener. You've got to be, and not just a home gardener. It's a totally different mindset, market gardening. There's just a lot to learn. Running a business, all of that stuff. I think it can easily be overwhelming, and so my advice to people is to start small, and to work and to take steps every season to step it up. For me, it was starting in the salads, because that seems to be, from everything I've learned and observed, it's probably the most profitable side of it all. Those quick crops, it's probably a really good place to start, and then you can build out from there. But I would just suggest start small, learn the craft, dedicate yourself to learning and growing and improvement, and take it one step at a time. Keep it manageable. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate your time. Anything else you want to share before we go?
Yeah, I do. I really just want to thank you, Michael. I really want to take this opportunity to just thank you for all the stuff that you've put out over the years. If it wasn't for you and your cohort, the JM and Curtis and Ray and Ben Hartman, and there's Diego, all you guys who are putting out podcasts and stuff on YouTube. And honestly, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be where I am. I'd just be mucking around with little market stalls. I wouldn't be making a livelihood in this field.
Yeah.
And that's been the secret to my success, is I've been an avid consumer of your products and your podcast, your summits, all of it. I've just lapped it up. I've gobbled it up, and it's been the key to my success, is just that mindset that you guys are teaching, and the practical skills, all of it. I'm just so grateful for you guys and you. So keep going. It's great what you're doing. Or you don't have to keep going. You've done enough. But if you do keep going, it'll be appreciated by me and others. So thank you for your service. I hope it's working for you, and I hope that you're getting back some rewards for what you're putting out. It's good quality, amazing stuff, and it's feeding a movement. So thank you.
Yeah, no, well, it's, yes, we're putting it out, but it also takes someone willing to learn to, receive it too. So there's always two sides to that. So, you're successful because you're out there learning. So, yeah. Well, again, great to have you on. I hear the lawnmower outside the window, so I better wrap this up before it gets too much louder on my end. But thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, it's time you go home anyway.
Okay. You have a great rest of your day.
Your family.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye now.
Yeah. Take care.
So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.